So, Ms. Williamson, if you are an independent, what do you say then to your critics who are saying, you're splitting the Democrat vote and that this campaign is just, a grifting, an opportunity to get a message out, but how you have a long shot? What is your answer to that to your critics?
First of all, I'm a Democrat. I said I'm an independent thinker, but no, I'm a Democrat. So you can't be a spoiler if you're running as a Democrat. If somebody says something like Jill Stein, the point was that she was not running as a Democrat. This is a primary. What's the grift? That's really my question. So what's the grift? And if I were just trying to get a message out, first of all, that wouldn't be wrong. Mm-hmm. But I've done that before. You don't go through this kind of to just get a message out. If I just want to get a message out, I could write a book. I want to help change the system. This country needs an economic U-turn. Mm-hmm. This country is 6 inches from the cliff in terms of the state of our democracy, the state of our environment, the state of our democracy. So I think that no one should be apologizing for coming in and saying, no, this has got to change, because that system has proven to itself it will not change.
So, Ms. Mary, let's talk a little bit about your policy. Okay. One of the things that you stand out for, and I remember that quite well, when you ran the last time, was reparations. And just for clarity, all Black Americans, their only concern is not reparations. We all know that we raise children, we care about education, we care about many things across the board, but you do stand out as a reparationist candidate. Now, the current administration does support H.R. 40, which will create a study on reparations, and you have been very vocal about that. And so tell us how you feel about the current administration's position on H.R. 40 and what would be different for you.
So the Biden administration's position on H.R. 40 is exactly what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. I knew John Conyers. He was a friend of mine. I raised my daughter in Detroit. John Conyers, if he were here today, he would be rolling his eyes. We don't need another study. Yeah. We don't need another study. So for the Biden administration to say, I support H.R. 40, which once again, John would say that was then, this is now. Okay, we've moved further. So we support H.R. 40, but of course Congress has to do it. That is the Biden administration in a nutshell. Kick that can down the road, do something performative where it sounds like, I really support that. It means nothing. We are at a point now where a president who actually supports reparations, which I do simply because I want to see this country heal. A country is a group of individuals. It's run by the same principles. The principle here is you can't have the future you want if you will not clean up the past. Mm-hmm. Simple. It's rather transactional for me. We don't need another study, and we don't need a president who says, but Congress needs to do it. We need to have a president who invites some Black leaders to Camp David for the weekend and says, okay, let's put on the table and start some negotiation. That is the president I would be, and that's the difference.
So Ms. Williamson, let me ask a follow-up on that then about lip service. So right now there's a California reparations task force. Mm-hmm. You come from California, correct?
Yeah. Well, I don't live there now, but I've lived many years there in my adult life, yes.
Okay, so have you been involved in the California task force in any way?
No, I haven't lived in California for probably 8 years.
Well, have you been involved in any task force anywhere?
Well, I've designed my own, and I've written books about it. I've been writing about reparations, talking about it, doing racial healing circles since the end of the 1990s. And I have a plan for reparations I've run for president twice now, actually, putting that out to the American people, which is, I believe, a megaphone that matters.
Sure, but you just mentioned it's important to have Black leaders at the table to talk about how do we do this. So I just want to be clear, and fair in asking, have you actually been involved with Black leaders?
Yes, I have. I would say the person who has affected my thinking the most is Sandy Darity. Sandy Darity is the first person I talked to, and his wife as well. I feel I was mentored by his information. Do you know what I'm saying? He was the first person I said, could you please explain this to me? I've read books such as Ta-Nehisi Coates and heard others, but I would say Sandy Darity is the person who is, I think, whose counsel has, I like the way he frames it, and it has meant something to me. Yeah.
So, Ms. Williamson, what because I've heard a lot about what the Biden administration is doing wrong. Tell me about your top. If you had to pick 3 top policies that you would focus on, first 100 days, or what do you see as because you have a lot of issues on your website, I know they're all equally important. But if you had to give us 3 on what you think is the most important thing to do right away, what would that be?
We need universal health care in this country. We have 1 in 4 Americans living with medical debt. We have 68,000 Americans a year who die from lack of health care. We have 85 million Americans who are either uninsured or underinsured. We have 18 million Americans who cannot afford to fulfill the prescriptions that their doctors give them. So movement towards universal health care is very important to me. I would cancel the college loan debt. We need to get back to free college in this country, which we had until the 1960s. I would have every single penny of the Pentagon audited. I would make sure that every company that has a contract with the U.S. government that is a union-busting company that those contracts are canceled. I would call together the group that I would like to go to Camp David to have a serious conversation about reparations. Also, talking about racial issues, I would call Tim Scott and Cory Booker into the Oval Office and say, bring whoever you want. We're not leaving this office until we have a serious bipartisan bill on police reform. BLM, for example, biggest protest movement in the history of this country, and there's not been one serious piece of legislation that has addressed the issues of police violence and what is obviously going on there, that something is very, very wrong.
So, Ms. Williamson, I am known to be pretty tough on candidates, when I'm asking questions. And, so I have to be fair and ask, I certainly appreciate the theory. I appreciate, writing books and great ideas. But in fairness, would you say that you bring experience on any level of government of actually getting, even small things done? Or what I'm looking for the receipts. What can we point to say, okay, this is the candidate that can actually get X, Y, Z done, or get us a little bit closer to it when you talk about, all of these things, particularly when you talk about the Black community?
So first of all, just in general, you're asking if I have the sort of technical expertise to perpetuate that system. Washington, D.C. is filled with political car mechanics. Some of them are very good, and certainly you have to hire those people and have them in your administration. The problem today is not that we don't have good political car mechanics. The problem is we are on the wrong road. So that question stems from this conversation that says, only people whose careers have been spent within the car that drove us into this ditch should possibly be considered qualified to lead us out of that ditch. My expertise is not that I know how to perpetuate and effectuate that system. My expertise is that I know something about disrupting it. And if you want to know that, listen to everything I've said here today.
Yeah, no, Ms. Williamson, respectfully, that's not what I'm saying. And using your analogy, what I'm saying is, have you ever touched a carburetor? Have you ever touched a motor? Have you ever touched anything, in the car?
So yes, I actually.
And I'm certainly not talking about a career. I'm saying that if, again, going back to the example on a task force, if there are active task force now on reparations, and I see any candidate for that matter not getting involved in having those conversations now and speaking from a theory standpoint, it does. I'm kind of taken aback by it, because I want to know if you're willing to get your hands dirty now, rolling up your sleeves to see what you can do now at your level. So that's what I'm asking.
I think we all do in the field that we can. I think I've gone far towards helping to create the conversation in the United States, which actually led to things like the situation in California. Everybody has their role. One of the things I have seen, and yes, I've been around a lot of people in politics, it's a business like any other. It's a business like any other. It's people sitting around a room, talking, negotiating. And yes, I have been as much of a businesswoman as any of the men who would come in here and be businessmen, and no one would say, well, would you know how to do it? So yes, I believe that I've worked with many, many people. But more than anything, I feel that I have the power to say what needs to be said and not obfuscate But yes, I've had plenty of experience at business, and I've been in political circles enough, including observing even at the White House, to see this is a political system like any other. It's men sitting around, women sitting around a table, just like we're doing now, having a conversation and talking about what we're going to do.
I just want to clarify one thing, because when Charlamagne talked about experience as well, and when I'm talking about experience, I'm certainly, just because I don't want anybody to hear this interview and get confused by what I mean, I'm certainly not talking about being elected or holding some type of office. I'm mainly talking about grassroots. So I'll just leave this statement that I think it is, Ms. Williamson, very important to get involved in things like the task force that they're taking public comment right now. Everyday citizens, they're putting their faces and names, in black and white to say how they feel. And so when you talk about a bully pulpit, I think that's a great way to start. And so when we look at what Kamala Moore is doing, as the chair of the Reparations Committee in California, a city you once lived in, or a state you once lived in, and a state you once ran in, I think it is critically important, to get your position on the record, because as these things happen on the state level, they obviously can happen on the federal level. And so that's very important to me, to see what can we do with our voice now. And so if everyday citizens can do it, if they can take out time, to go down and do a 5-minute testimony, many of them have been doing it electronically online. I think it's very important for any candidate running for president of the United States to do it as well.
Yeah, I hear that, and I appreciate that. I also think if you've been writing books about the subject that have sold to millions of people for decades, starting in the late 90s, your voice has been heard as well. Also, I have founded nonprofit organizations, including an organization called Project Angel Food, which is where a lot of my work was when I was in California, which has served over 16 million meals now to homebound people. It began as feeding people who are homebound with AIDS and HIV, but now anyone with a critical illness. So I think everybody contributes on the level that they can, uses the voice, whether it's on a podcast. I think we're all contributing to a larger conversation. Everybody does what is theirs to do.
Yeah, I think Ted is talking specifically about reparations, but like you said, you've written books. So that is
I was writing about reparations in 1998, my first book.
Oh, sure. And I'm not minimizing that. I'm just,
I understand what you're saying.
Everybody. I'm certainly not minimizing that.
Well,
I
don't live in California, and I haven't lived in California for years. So I think my strolling into California to say something in a public comment section on California when I'm not a citizen of California. But I do think I understand what you're saying. And
I'm not minimizing what you're saying. There's task force everywhere, and people are commenting everywhere, even in California. I'm just saying, there's things happening now on the local and the state level that I would like any candidate, not just you. And it's not minimizing you and your books and all of the things that you wrote. I'm just saying, when we criticize candidates for being lip service, those are one of the things that I always ask for. What are we doing?
Well, is there another president? Is there another presidential candidate talking about reparations right now?
No, I criticize them just as well, ma'am, even worse. Yeah. But I'm still going to ask you the questions.
and I think running for president is a way that you are contributing to the political commentary. So I think by running for,
So speaking of a health issue, one of the other things that people, bring up a lot when they talk about you is your comments on illness and how illness was an illusion, and that AIDS patients was a physical manifestation of sin. Is that correct? Or would you like to clarify that?
I would be glad to clarify that. Thank you. As I mentioned before, I founded an organization called Project Angel Food, which fed people, has fed 16 million meals to people with life-challenging illnesses. I was a very involved AIDS activist. The last thing I ever told the thousands of people with AIDS and other critical illness that I have worked with is that their disease wasn't real, that they got it because they didn't pray enough. Illness, that one line that you just took out of context, and I know those are on the talking points, take them out of context. When I said that that issue of illusion, I said it the way Buddha says it, the way Einstein says it. President Biden has probably stood up in church thousands of times and affirmed his faith in the virgin birth. No one thinks that the president doesn't know where babies come from. So when you talk about three-dimensional life as an illusion, Einstein said time and space are illusions, but albeit persistent ones. That's a line that was taken out of my books. I don't need to be schooled by someone, let's say like Sonny Hostin on The View, that I don't recognize the reality of people's illness. My sister died of breast cancer. I have been at the bedside and officiated at the funerals of hundreds and hundreds of people. Mm-hmm. I am the last person in this country who does not understand the reality of physical illness. The difference between me and a lot of my critics is how much I have tried to do in my life to be of service to them. As far as saying sickness is a sign of a psychic scream, what therapist wouldn't say that? What therapist would? This is 2023. This is not 1984. The idea of the body-mind connection, that physicality and the emotional life and the screaming inside, the idea that this is seen as some kind of a fringe comment is an example of where our system just seeks to peripheralize those who do not find convenient to have in the conversation.
Did Sonny use that against you? Did Sonny?
Yeah,
okay.
on the ladies of The View don't like me this year.
No, they don't like you too much.
Huh?
Yeah, they've been bringing that up a lot. That's why I wanted to, hear your.
Thank you.
It's because you're challenging their president.
Challenging their club. It's not just their president. It's their club.
Decided. Is that the mentality that you think hurt somebody like a Bernie Sanders in 2016?
Pardon, what about Bernie?
You think that's the mentality that hurt like a Bernie Sanders in 2016?
Duh.
Yeah.
Hello.
Well, I know. Well, it's a lot that hurt Bernie Sanders. And speaking of that, what is your makeup for Black staff? I'm just curious. Have you started getting your staff together, or what would that look like? Because one of the things that's really important, particularly when you, talk about getting the Black vote and having, conversations with Black Americans. Obviously, you're going to talk to everybody, but the majority of folks, that at least listen here, are of color and particularly Black. What will your Black staff be looking like? One of the areas that Bernie Sanders failed in tremendously.
Our press secretary is a Black man. All of my staff in South Carolina, I have 3 people, and then in Georgia. So I have 5 Black people are currently serving on my staff out of 12.
Okay.
All right. Well, we appreciate you for stopping.
Marianne,
I'm sure we'll see you again.
Thank you.
What's the website?
Marianne2024.com.
Okay.
Right.
Always a pleasure to see you, Ms. Williamson.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to see you, too. Thank you for having me, Charlamagne.
Thank
you. Thank you. Nice meeting you.
Thank you so much. It's Marianne Williamson. She's running for president, guys. It's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.
Running the rats like I want them. Count up the red, we gon' want them. Carrots on one of my opponents. Clarity beats, I see water. Talk that cat shit like I want them.